Hello. Hi. Uh, Hello, good evening, everyone. Can just anyone confirm that if the sound is audible right now? Are we able to look at? Yes. So I suppose the screen is visible right now. Can someone confirm if the audible is fine? Are we able to listen properly right now before we start any further? Hi, hello. Yes. Um, is the sound reaching there? Hi, hello. Okay, a very good evening, everyone. Just I will need one confirmation so that we can go. Yes, okay, perfect. So, got one confirmation that we are receiving the sound. I hope everyone is doing great today. Today, Sunday evening, had a light day. Um, and is isn't just so we will today we are organizing this as through I am Ayushi from RaddiConnect, and before we go any further, it'll be nice if all the people who are joining in for a little introduction. So, the idea of it not being a video but it being a webinar wherein interaction can happen to some extent is that we have it a two-way. So, I get an idea of I mention a few things, but also we have the questions and all of those being answered. So, that said, please give out a little introduction from your side. Any things, any expectation that you have from your side in terms of what you're expecting that will be coming out, you can just put it out in the right in the front and we'll see if that was covered or not. And then we can by the end also have sure that every all of the concerns are answered. Point being, at the end of the day, we want it to be a two-way thing and not just me pointing out, mentioning one thing after the other. And I will also request you to put down sign up for just whosoever are joining in. They can, as we end towards the later, they can fill in the details in the link that I've shared in the comment section. So we will wait 2 minutes, 2 or so minutes now before everyone join in. We let everyone connect in, and then we start forward. So as you see right now here, it's we talking about the segregation at source in Mumbai. A lot of conversation. What today we'll be talking about is to actually get an idea about a topic that has been talked about so much, but how do we practically get that implemented in our day to day lives? We are talking so much about it. Why are we talking so much about it? So, all of this, before I go any further, for my introduction, I am Ayushi Verma from RaddiConnect. We are BMC MCGM's Driveways partner in our North Ward, which works in partnership with HUL and UNDP to ensure that all of the driveways that collected get processed in a decentralized manner. So, what happens is that whenever any society starts segregating their material, we work. Uh, this is, for example, the awareness program that is happening, wherein you will be talking about different kind of segregation that can happen into wet, dry, and reject. And once anyone starts segregating, there's a van that gets sent to the society from where the dry waste gets picked up separately from the rest of the dry, reject, and wet, and then it is brought to the facility that you're seeing picture of right now, and it is processed there, wherein after the processing includes segregation of metal, paper, plastic into further different categories, and then which gets baled and segregated and sent to the recyclers further. What happens with that is, instead of that material going into landfills or oceans, they get instead turned into new products. And there's also the Safai Sathis who get integrated through the whole project. So this is an image that I wanted to start out with, so that you have an idea. It's a very short thing that we want to keep it today. You have an idea of what of the pictures that we can go back to when I'm talking about uh, different things of the processing of the segregation, so that it's not an image that we see on everyday basis. So this is something so that we can recall and work out that this is the material recovery facility. We know it as dry waste collection center that is there in our North Ward in Kandarpada. Now, in today's webinar, we'll be dealing with what is the problem and what is the solution. The problem, when we're discussing about the problem, before we go into that, can you just, let's just have everyone put it out. What is the option that they are currently going out with? How are you currently disposing your waste? Are you going with option A, where you keep your wet, dry, and reject separately? Or are you going with wet and dry separately? Or are you keeping mixed? I am looking at the comment section. Please let me know. So, how are you disposing your waste? So, we have to make it. Anytime you have any confusion, any question, anything at all, please put it down in the comment section. I'm constantly looking at that. What is the option for you? How do you go about segregation at your place? I know we're keeping it the whole thing idea, but what is mixed, A, B, C, all of them is completely fine at this moment. Option B, we have wet and dry. All right. Yes. Option C, we have mixed. All right. Completely all right. How about everyone else? How are we keeping our waste? Totally waiting for your answers here. Yes. Option C. All right. So mixed. So right now, here are the three options. This is again an image that please keep in your head, that the segregation can be of three kind. How does three of it impact of how it goes further? So the problem we start about is that we why are we even having this conversation? Why are we having even today's webinar, that where we talking about that segregation should happen at source? Why are people Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, Har Din Do Bin Teen Bin, why is all of that conversation happening? We'll look into why is that happening, and that will also present us the reasons of why is that the problem in existing in the first place, and then we'll move on to the solution of how we can practically make it happen in a very natural way. Right now it might not seem right like it, but how do we practically make it happen? So now the problem starts with literally gigantic. It's not the first time you're seeing this images. You would have seen it in different magazine or newspaper, on TV, television, anywhere. The problem literally right now we have in front of us is gigantic. We do not have space. We do not have the land where we can throw all of our waste, and we're throwing it all. The solution simply starts with segregation. That's a literally gigantic problem, with the solution starting with segregation at source. And we see how that works. That's one problem number one, and reason one of why the segregation should happen. Because of it is all of it is going in those big mountains, it is all leaching down. वो सारा लीच होके धरती के अंदर चला जाता है, and there from there on it comes to the water that we are drinking. From the drinking water, it goes to the agriculture, the food that is cultivated using that water. It goes into our agriculture. It also seeps, and when all of that pollution reaches oceans, also it reaches in the form of microplastic. Basically, at the end of the day, we are eating our own plastics. We're throwing it seemingly farther away, but we have started eating plastic. And according to the study, which has been backed by even WWF, we're already eating a credit card worth size of plastic every week. And if we don't stop doing that right now, it is just going to be increasing. Problem number three. Um, just a second. Now here we're talking about humans and the exploitations of human that comes with it. Every single time that we fail to keep our products material aside, we basically require someone else to make sure that all of it is most maximum possible amount of it is getting recycled. And it's not just the adults, it's also the children. This is the footage by an NGO uh, that we have in right in front of us. That is happening because we did not keep it separate at our own level. Now we said that all of it is being taken out. If we don't do it, someone else has to do it. It is because all that you see it in front of you, it's just this much. If this was the total amount of waste that was coming out of our houses, uh, if we keep the wet aside and if we keep the dry aside, that is the 90% of whatever we are producing on an everyday basis. And that is reusable and can be converted into compost. Wet can be is converted into compost, and rest of the material is converted into different kind of products. These are just some of the examples. The actual waste is just this much percent. But the same thing, when we don't do it, when we mix all of it together, all of it is not possible, and then we come to the first picture where we have everything thrown in the mountain only because we did not keep it separate. And this reason is still applicable for us. things are getting better for our own good. That's a very good thing. But COVID and in general all sort of diseases, the diseases are they can spread through how we are consuming things, how we are throwing things. It's very contagious. COVID, we still are working from home. Everything is happening right now, and it requires us that we are very careful of how we are disposing our waste. So our mask, our gloves, all of this, after we are done using it, how we are throwing it. Now, usually when we talk about segregation, everyone almost have already have an idea about wet and dry, uh, if we're not talking about mixed. But will I initially mentioned those three kind of pictures where there are three kind of pins. The idea was that in each of the options there is a different channel, there are different hands through which it goes to different places. So when everything is mixed, it goes out of our house, it goes into society and dumps it. And when it is wet and dry, it goes out of our house, dry goes into dry waste collection center, and then the wet one goes to the composting unit. Now, in this scenario, what we have is what we usually do. We don't necessarily know, we are not really involved with our different areas of work and interest. We do not know what happens to the waste when it goes out of our houses. There are times when we have someone who is coming to our house and collecting it. There are other times when there's not even any housekeeping stuff and we just go and dump it to some particular space. But at every step of the way there are humans involved. So from it reaching from our house to the house, from our housing society to the compound, and from there to the dry waste collection center, there is some human contact involved every step of the way, which we do not really get to see, but is something that for us to know. What happens is when we have things like mask and other biohazardous waste, there's no way for it has to go to dump site or it has to go to composting unit or dry waste collection center. It is not meant for any of them. And that's the reason we talk about three-way segregation. Till now I talked about five reasons of why, what is the problem, why does the problem exist, and why is that a reason for us to start segregating. All of the reasons do not, for one person, for the other person a different reason might be the valid reason, but all of them is something that is on the table, is affecting all of us, and is why I point out to three-way segregation and not even two-way segregation. This is what we have is a wet waste. We'll go into detail of what goes into what in later part, in just few minutes. But this is the wet one, which has a different purpose from the blue one. And this is where we have the mask. Now, we usually omit that biohazardous is not required. I, for now, will mention about biohazardous that it will not be much. You will maximum will have to take it out 2 to 3 times a month, unless you are from a household which has a baby or a elderly person where there's use of diapers. In other cases you will not have much of it. But is that a valid reason to not keep it? It wouldn't be. I mean, do you take out do you mop the house on everyday basis? If yes, then you have biohazardous waste coming out of your house every day. That मिट्टी जो साफ करने पे निकलती है वो जाती है ये लाल बायोहजार्डस डस्टबिन में, जिसमें जाता है आपकी दवाइयाँ, आपके कोई भी ऐसी चीज़ जो हमारे शरीर को छू के निकलती है. तो हमने अगर कोई टिश्यू पेपर में छीका है, कुछ भी, अगर कोई भी ऐसी चीज़ है जो हमारे शरीर को छूती है, तो वो बायोहजार्डस में जाती है. और मिट्टी हो जो घर की होती है वो भी बायोहजार्डस में जाती है क्योंकि वो इनर्ट होता है. ये सारी चीज़ें और अलग से जाती है. तो क्या इसका द रीजन वाई ऑल ऑफ दैट हैपेंस इज बिकॉज these are the carrier of diseases. It has a body fluid, and because of that it goes out and has the chances of spreading the diseases. So that's why we'll look into how we go about into three-way segregation. Now this is the picture from the dry waste collection center. Here In the COVID, when the COVID started, and it's still going on, the center would get masks and all of these things coming out. They are wearing masks and gloves, and all of the safety precautions is being taken care of. But when all of the humans who are involved at the every step of the way, if you remember the initial where the collection is happening, unloading is happening at the center, there are humans involved. And because of all of this, when they are not given out in a contained fashion, it just increases, it is always increasing the danger in which they are working in. So it should be given out in a specific way, away from the rest of the wet and the dry. So that's where the problem is. What is the most important reason according to you for due to which we should be segregating our waste? There are the five reasons that I mentioned out earlier. What, according to you, is the most important, or most convincing one for you that we should segregate our waste? Before we go into solution, it is really important that we understand why it is important. Then only we'll make that, have go through that period, a little small number, a few days of period where it's not really that natural to us before it becomes natural to us. So I am looking at the comment section now. Are there doubts till now? Are there any other things that you think are they're the different reasons that were mentioned earlier, from that there is landfills, overflowing landfills is the reason, that it leads to cruelty towards, it leads to exploitation, it leads to us becoming eating plastic on an everyday basis. What, according to you, is the most convincing? What, it could not be out of five, it could be any other reason as well. Why do you think the segregation is very important? Come on, we have uh, w- a very brief answer. And if anyone has any questions right now, please feel free to point it out right now. And please feel free to point out any questions that you have as we go. All right. Any reason, which is the most convincing reason for you to why we should segregate? Is anyone okay? Instead of mentioning which one, are you convinced that we should be segregating in the first place? I'm sure for the people who are attending this, they are pretty convinced that we should be segregating. But yes, what's the most important reason for you? One answer and we move forward. And get the guidelines after we come to know about why to do it. Yes. Can we get guidelines after we came to know about why to do it? Yes, definitely. So we're moving to the solution of how do we go about it in a natural way. Till now, I've been focusing on understanding the reason, and that reason, understanding why we should do it, also guides us to how to go about segregating it and how to make sure that it becomes the part of our lifestyle. So it's a simple thing. There are just three steps for every household involved. What you have to do is, just for the next 2 weeks, make sure that every single time you're throwing something, make sure that you are throwing it into the right bin. That's the only thing that you have to do. Before you throw, just make sure that it's the right bin that you are keeping it in. Now, for the first step, what we have to do is set up before you can think about which bin you're throwing it. You set up, there are three kind of bins in the house. Now, you don't necessarily have to go and buy new bins to do that. You can make arrangement with the existing system in your household. There is definitely going to be at least one bin in the house that you can keep for your reject biohazardous waste. Make sure this is the bin which has its lid covered. And for the wet and the dry, what you do is, for the wet, it's like how you cut your vegetables and the peels. You could, you just keep it in a container and then you throw it off. It's like that. Once we start segregating, the all the material that comes out is that sort of a green waste which can be kept in any container, small container, the quantity gets reduced drastically when we keep it separate from the rest of the material. So what you can do is use any of the steel container that you might have, or you could use just a plastic container that you might have. You keep it in one side for your wet compostable items, and for the dry recyclables, what you do is just have a bag. Any bag would work, where you are it can be any sort of bag you're just keeping in the house in one corner, which doesn't have to be a bin. So you'll be sorted in terms of having 3 bin for your use. That's the step number 1. Step number 2, as I said, was for 2 weeks. Just for 2 weeks, be very, be cautious that every single time you're throwing, make sure that you know which bin are you throwing that in. If it is wet one, then throw it into the compostable items. If it is recyclable one, you throw in this one. We'll also look into a video which will tell us. So the idea of every kind of waste is that they are meant for different purpose. The earlier one that you meant was the compost. Anything that can be turned into compost is thrown into this. These are natural items made by God, or however you would want to identify it. These are the natural items that exist in nature. Recyclable items are the old man-made ones, which has to be recycled. So you keep it, you throw it into a recyclable one. But if it is mixed, what you do is you keep the recyclable item, you take out the other sort of, you clean if it's not, if it's dirty, if it's a tetra pack, milk tetra pack, you rinse it, you let it dry, and then you put into the recyclable item. This is a material that you can keep for days. You don't have to worry about it, of how long it stays in your house if you're keeping it right. You just let it dry properly and keep it in one side. And the reject waste is the one where you use. So we say don't keep any bin liner for compostable items, neither for recyclable. It's a bag, you don't require it anyway. For the compostable items, when you give it out, you just rinse it. And for the reject waste is the one that you throw your all the items, as I mentioned about, that the material that touches your body, or the dust that comes out of your house after you sweep the house, mop the house, that goes into the reject waste.
हाय, ये वीडियो आपको बताएगी कि कचरे
So this video will the next video that I am going to be playing is the video that is going to be telling you about the segregation, of what is the logic, how to go about it.
हाय, ये वीडियो आपको बताएगी कि कचरे को कैसे करते हैं 3 भाग में अलग अलग: सूखा, गीला और घरेलू खतरनाक। सूखी चीज़ें इंसानों की बनाई वस्तुएं हैं, उनसे नई चीज़ें बनती हैं, जैसे ये ग्लास बॉटल, दूध का पैकेट, धातु, कागज़, बाकी प्लास्टिक सामान। गीला कचरा प्रकृति में पैदा होने वाली चीज़ें हैं, जिसका खाद बन सकता है, जैसे कि ये केले का छिलका, अंडे का छिलका इत्यादि। और घरेलू खतरनाक कचरे से बीमारी फैलने का डर रहता है, क्योंकि या तो ये वस्तुएं हमारे शरीर को छूती हैं, जैसे कि पैट या तीखी वस्तुएं होती हैं। इनका ना खाद बन सकता है, ना रिसाइकलिंग होती है। क्या कहाँ जाएगा बताना आसान होता है अगर ये पता हो कि उसका क्या होगा, जैसे कि ये कागज़ अगर साफ़ है तो रिसाइकल होगा, नहीं तो उसका सिर्फ खाद ही बन सकता है। और ये नैपकिन जिसमें आपने छींका वो खतरनाक नहीं जाएगा। सूखे का मतलब ये नहीं है कि कुछ भी सूखा। इस बिस्किट का पैकेट में बचे हुए ख़राब बिस्किट गीले में जाएंगे जबकि वो सूखे हैं, पर सिर्फ पैकेट सूखे में जाएगा रिसाइकलिंग के लिए। इस डिब्बे को धोकर सूखने देंगे सूखे कूड़े में डालने से पहले। वैसे ही दूध की थैली को भी धोकर सूखने देंगे उसे सूखे में डालने से पहले। तो अगर समझ नहीं आ रहा तो कुछ करना छूट रहा है। हर चीज़ का अलग इस्तेमाल है, गीले का खाद के लिए, सूखे का रिसाइकलिंग के लिए और घरेलू खतरनाक का इंसिनरेशन के लिए। तो जो कचरा है ही नहीं उसे खराब नहीं करते हैं।
So we'll share all of that videos with you. We will share, I will put down the all the videos that you can access. But the idea of that image in the video was talk about that how do you find out what goes into what. It can be at times be tricky that where do you put a certain item. So there are some confusing items we will look at, and we'll please answer how do we go about it. So eggshells, for example, would anyone want to take a lead on where do we put the eggshells out of wet, dry, or reject? Anyone want to take a guess? Want to put out where would we want put eggshell? Egg is something that is coming out of nature. It is a natural item, hence it'll be put into the wet because then later on it can get converted into compost. Similarly, tissue papers, which is being used by a sick person, it's a tissue paper which has carrier of diseases. Because it's a carrier of diseases, so we put it into the reject one. Then we have dust from sweeping the house. How about we go with the I did mention this earlier. How do we go about dust from sweeping the house? Where do we put that? Do we put that into the wet, dry, or reject? Yes, biohazardous. Correct. So it's an inert waste which cannot be recycled, which cannot be composted. Because it cannot be recycled or composted, hence we put it into the biohazardous waste in that dustbin. How about the milk cartons or even the milk packets? So, you know, all those milk packets that we get on the daily basis, or the cartons, the Tetra packs that we get. What do we do with that? Where do we put it? For the milk packet, we put it in the dry recyclable bin, in the dry recyclable bag or whatever that you have, because that is something that can be recycled. However, if we put it as it is, then it's wet and it starts smelling. You can't keep it, and it makes it difficult further. So what we do is, when there are things like that which are dirty, you know, it's a good idea to follow of, you know, how we have to give something to a raddi wala, we give out only clean items. So it's an item, we have to expand our idea of raddi to all sort of recyclables, where it's just not the newspaper. Raddi is not just newspaper, but it also includes plastic, paper, metal, glass of other kinds which can be recycled. Raddi is is a slang word that we use for the material that can be recycled. Now, milk carton is recyclable as well. We have to make sure that that is clean and dry when we are putting it into our recyclable bag. So what we do is just rinse it, let it dry. We can have a different. We can let it dry in the kitchen and then put it into the bag with the rest of the containers. And the last one to take over right now is the food leftover container. If there's the food, if we have ordered from outside, unfortunately the food has gotten bad. It's a plastic container, but it has food inside. So i- there are times when people get confused about what do we do about it. So for those containers, there's a food inside it which is compostable, but we cannot. But rest of the material is plastic. So in that case, what we do is clean out the compostable material, wash it off, and for the plastic container, we put it in the recycling bag. Again, the idea is rinse it, clean it, rinse, dry, and keep it in the recyclable bin. And that's how we come to the third and the final step, and that is it. This is the whole. We start with the daily removing our wet and dry wet waste. the peels, the kitchen waste comes out on the daily basis. When we keep it separate, if we keep it for longer than 2 days, it just starts smelling very badly. You would want to keep it out every day. And once you've given out, you can just rinse it and keep the bin there. It's the daily. So the frequency for this is that it goes out on daily basis. For the recyclable, as I mentioned earlier, you give it out as and when you have to give out. You just let it. You just keep piling it up when it gets full, and you give it out when you have to. And the third is the reject one. This is the only one where we say that you use your uh, plastic bag, this government approved plastic bag, in fact, that which is used. And whenever you're done, 2 to 3 times a month, when you have to give it out, what you do is when it is full, or however much it is, you just knot it and give it to your safai sathi. So they'll know that it's a dirty one and they don't have to touch it, and it'll go as it is. No one is getting in touch with that. And that's how we ensure that not just the COVID, but all sort of infections are not getting carried forward. Our waste is not something someone else should have to sift through it. So what we make sure is that any other thing that can cause anyone else disease, we make sure that it is going out in a closed fashion. So all of it, that's just the three main steps, and which was all particularly related to one another. That's the solution to all the big problems that we started out with, the big problems that is existing in the world, and it helps us to save resources, do all of that things. It's just that small. But I am saying that that might not necessarily what you might feel. So do you think it's doable for you? Do you think you can start segregating? And it is completely perfectly okay if you think it is not doable. The reason I say so is that the idea of this webinar and it not being just a video shared with you of why the segregation should happen, the the benefit right now is that you can point out to all the concerns that you have. What are the reasons of not doing it? We earlier considered of the reasons that we should segregate. What, according to you, are the reasons that hinders people in general from segregating? Do you think it's doable? Do you think it's not doable? Looking at the comment section. And if there is anyone who think that segregation is not possible, what are your concerns so that we can address it? So yes, is there any concern right now? And if you think it's doable and we will still do our best to segregate, is there still any concern that you might have that we can address right now? Is there anything that comes to your head that this is not, even if we do it, this is not going to be working, that is not going to be working? So are there any concerns that we have here? I guess there are no concerns. So usually the concerns that we get is that even if we segregate, the vehicle come and they will just all combine into one. The Safai Sathi who's coming to our society, they will combine all of it into one, even if we segregate. I will do it, but other people won't do it. These are some of the concerns that we get. And all of that is, as yes, as Devin is provide Devin V is writing down, collection should be proper. Correct. Collection has to be proper. So the first thing right now here is that there are two options that can happen. One is that you talk to your Safai Sathi and have them adopt a system of one bin, two bags. wherein there is one big for wet waste every day and the two bags are for dry waste and reject waste. So that way everything remains separate and they don't have to carry anything extra. Their weight load does not get increased. That's one way where they are getting involved and there's incentive for them, because a lot of time they also take out their material to sell, and if they are getting their material separately, then they get all the more interested in getting the material separately. So then it's easier for them to take it out and in a safer fashion. They don't have to sift through mixed waste, so they get interested more than interested. But if you have a society where your safai sathi is not interested in doing that, the other option that you can have is that you keep a separate bin downstairs. You keep a separate bin downstairs, um, which allows you to, I will just open a few steps that are there, which is required for any society to ensure that the segregation is happening. So the step number one is that you have three different kind of bins. Even if you don't have three different kind of bins, that you let RaddiConnect know. We'll provide you different gunny bags for your different collection for the makeshift arrangement, and going forward you have your different kind of bins. In the training Safai Sathi part that I was mentioning about, there is this whole kit where you can train your Safai Sathi by just showing them the video, where they understand what they're supposed to do and why they are supposed to be also become why they also, it's beneficial for them also to become part of the whole segregation program that your society is looking to take forward. Now, one thing that I said was that they collecting it separately, that collection is important. But if that is not happening for some reason, what you can do is that one bin that you have downstairs, have that dry recyclable material put separately by the societies, and the collection happen on the general basis otherwise. So you give out your biohazardous and wet waste separately to your Safai Sathi, and for the dry recyclable you put it directly to the bin. For the awareness which is happening right now, this is there, and there's also the bunch of messages that you can access. There are lots of videos that you can access on RaddiConnect's website, and have shared a link on the comment section which provides you different awareness messages in all different languages, in Hindi, English, and Marathi, that you can circulate with, you can show it to your members. There are people who are present here, there are people who are not present from your society. They can look at those messages at their convenient time and really understand why the segregation should happen and how should they go about it. A circular can be issued, which is there again in the kit, to formalize the whole process. And after the society has started segregating, the society can call for dry waste van, which is where a lot of people have concern that we will collect it, but the collection by the van happens with just one van, and which mixes it all. That is not true. Dry waste van doesn't go to every place if they're not segregating. Once you started segregating, call on these numbers and we'll ensure that the first time the pickup is happening once you arrange it. Then after that, it happens on the regular basis without you having to do anything. So first time you arrange for the pickup, and from going after that, every time it happens on the regular basis on its own. And monitoring is something that you can do at your convenience. So these are the things that are there. This is the message that I have shared the link to, which is about the segregation messages, which has English, Hindi, Marathi messages for you to understand of how you can do it later on. Show it to your family members of why the segregation should happen. So yes, that's we come at from the point of having gigantic problem to a point where we have a solution which is as simple and can be totally incorporated in a society. Right now, we'll take up questions for the next 5 minutes, if you have any. How many days we have to preserve waste at home if we are segregating, and how soon this can go as per process. So you don't have for the three different kind of waste that you're taking out. The wet compostable one goes out on the daily basis because it starts smelling from the second day itself. For the dry recyclable ones, you keep it in your house as long as possible. But if it's starting to smell, then it probably you did not keep it in the way you had to. Make sure the material, make sure your recyclables are clean and dry so that you can keep it for as long as possible. And for the dry, for the reject, it is that's why the reason I mentioned that the dustbin has to be closed lid so that all the sources of bacteria, virus, basically sources of diseases stay contained in that bag, in the dustbin liner that you have. And when you have to give it out, whenever you give it out in 15 days time, 20 days time, whenever you do that, you just wrap it, you knot the tie, and then you give it to your safai sathi. For example, if went out for few days and not available at home. So I assume I have answered your question. So there is no specific, you can keep it for as long as possible. Only for the wet waste, it you would not want to keep it in your house after a point because it'll start smelling. Are there any other questions? Can BMC provide recyclable bags? BMC will not be providing recyclable bags. Recyclable bag is a much more uh, fluid, frigid. I am not getting the right word. It's not something that BMC will able to. Logistics will not be manageable. So recyclable bags is something that has to be born at the personal level. Is there anything else? Do we have any other questions? So, all of this might seem like a lot of change at a point. Uh, all of has to be done. There's this only few days period of time when it seems like an unnatural change. It seems like unnatural to, think which one you're putting into, or even cleaning before you're putting into the dry recyclable. All of those things, it seems unnatural for only few days, but as simple as it goes for the rest of the habits, forming habits, where you do it for a certain number of days and it becomes habit after that, which you don't have to, it becomes automatic for you. That's the same it goes for segregation. So you do it for 14 days, 14 to 21, 14 to 20 days of conscious effort, and after that it becomes very natural that you don't even have to think about it. So yes, big problems, smaller solutions, which is what we need right now. And if we don't have any further doubts, with that we will conclude today's session. I hope you all are having a safe time at home. Thank you. Bye bye. Good evening. Night.